You have no evidence and you are abusing the law. I don't accept this. He shouted at the top of his lungs. One after another, his trusted aides stood up and shouted that they were not convinced. They also said that if they were to be judged guilty, the commander-in-chief privately mobilizing the troops was a crime worthy of 10,000 deaths. As such, the left wing had become Su Mao's private army. Tie them all up. It's better to kill the wrong person than to let them go. Yu Pinyin waved his sleeves and the soldiers rushed forward to tie them up. As long as the left-wing general was eliminated, the soldiers under his command would still have to listen to the commander's orders. The dungeon was silent. The remaining generals wanted to say something but hesitated. They looked at Fong De frequently. Although the two of them had won the battle, they would still be sentenced to death when they returned to the capital for the crime of privately mobilizing troops. They were loyal to the commander, but even more loyal to Emperor Qin Kong. They were thinking about how to deal with this. Yu Pinyin looked at the crowd indifferently. Seeing that there were no sneaky people left, he took out the dark iron token from his inner pocket. Everyone was shocked. Even Su Mao stopped cursing and looked dazed. They never thought that the emperor would trust the commander to this extent. Use torture. We must find out the mastermind behind this. Yu Pinyin waved his hand and walked out of the dungeon slowly. In order to prevent spies from hiding in Ulan Chabu, Yu Xiang and his two servants still disguised themselves as secular disciples and mixed in with a group of monks. Ku Hui went to the barracks to treat the wounded as soon as he arrived. In order to reduce the pain caused by the friction of cloth, most of the wounded took off their battle robes and exposed their breasts. Some were injured on their legs and did not even wear pants. Therefore, when Yu Xiang proposed to take care of the wounded, he was glared at by Yu Pinyin. He had no choice but to go back to his room with Tao Hong and Lu Lu to rest. Although Yu Pinyin had special treatment as the commander, the courtyard he lived in was not big. There were a total of 5 rooms. 2 of them were filled with sundries. A soldier was in charge of washing clothes and cooking. You can go back. I'll take care of things here. Yu Xiang said to the soldier in a rough voice. Because the commander had ordered him to listen to this person's orders, the soldier obediently left. Yu Xiang immediately changed to a crisp voice. Quickly start the fire. I'll cook for Gij. Tao Hong squatted in front of the stove to start the fire. Lu Lu looked through the basket and asked worriedly, Miss, you've never cooked before. Can you do it? You'll know once you try. Yu Xiang picked up the kitchen knife and gestured at the pork on the chopping board. After a while, the pork was not cooked properly, the vegetables were burned, the eggs were smashed on the ground, and the rice was burnt. All the ingredients were completely ruined by her. Forget it. Miss, you can make the pancakes. This is the easiest. Look, I'll knead the dough and spread it out into a pancake. You just need to wipe the inside of the pan with this lard paste. Then put the pancake in and flip it from time to time. When both sides of the pancake turn golden brown, you can take it out. Easy, right? Lu explained while pouring the flour into the basin. Easy, I got it. Yu Xiang also reached into the basin and stirred. She even twisted a piece of dough and kneaded it into the shape of a little pig. The master and servant worked together and finally made a pot of browned pancakes. After sprinkling chopped green onions on them, they smelled quite good. As soon as the pancakes were placed on the table, Yu Pinyin came back with the smell of blood on his body. Yu Xiang did not feel uncomfortable at all. She jumped up and hung around his neck. She wrapped her legs tightly around his waist and smiled brightly. I made pancakes for you to eat. I made them with my own hands. She emphasized the word, with my own hands. The anger that lingered in his heart instantly dissipated. Yu Pinyin laughed softly. He held her soft buttocks with both hands and carried her to the Kong bed. The Kong bed table was already full. In addition to a pot of pancakes, there was also a plate of cucumber strips, a plate of shredded green onions and ginger, and a plate of sauce. Yu Xiang came out from her brother's arms. She picked up some cucumber strips, shredded green onions and ginger, and wrapped them in the pancakes. She put them in front of her brother's mouth. "Try it and see if it tastes good." Yu Pinyin could swallow it without batting an eyelid if it was made by the little lass herself. Not to mention, the pancakes were crispy, the cucumber was sweet, the shredded green onions and ginger were spicy, and the sauce was thick. It was unexpectedly delicious. He fed the rest of the pancakes to his sister's mouth and sincerely praised, "It's delicious. Your cooking skills are very good." Yu Xiang smiled until her eyes narrowed. She took a big bite and chewed slowly. She asked, "Do you think I'm very virtuous? Do you think you're very lucky to have married me?" "Yes, you're very virtuous. Being able to marry you is the luckiest thing in my life." Yu Pinyin laughed loudly. He leaned over and kissed his sister's oily little mouth. He also licked the sauce off her lips. Yu Xiang put down the pancake and earnestly asked, "Brother, I want a pancake-flavored kiss. Can you give it to me now?" Yu Pinyin laughed even louder. In the end, he pried open his sister's bright red lips and sucked deeply. After parting his lips, he said in a hoarse voice, "Little demon, how can you be so cute? Brother can't wait to eat you. Then you can eat." Her reactions were so straightforward and cute. When she was in pain, she would bite and kick and quietly sob. When she was in pleasure, she would immediately use her hands and feet to climb up, following his rhythm and pounding. The desire that had accumulated for more than 20 years was released. Wave after wave of pleasure drove people crazy. Yu Pinyin's eyes were scarlet red. Like a wolf, he stared at the girl with a happy expression below him. He wished he could die inside her body. It turned out that flying with the person he loved was such an extreme pleasure. He only wanted to sink into oblivion and never wake up again. Chapter 126. The second prince of Western Yi was born after the Yuan dynasty and was deeply doted on by the emperor and empress. In addition, he defeated the Han army when he first entered the battlefield. He won 2 cities in a row and even killed Yu Pinyin, who was known as the invincible god of war. As long as he returned alive, the throne would be his. Therefore, the first prince, the third prince, and the fourth prince were anxious. One after another, they sent troops to force the emperor to abdicate. By the time the news of Yu Pinyin capturing the second prince came, it was already too late. The several princes had already formed a blood feud that was difficult to reverse. The various tribes of Western Yi were also torn apart. As the saying goes, take advantage of your illness to take your life. Yu Pinyin timely sent troops to the west, directly flattened the Western Yi imperial court, and took the heads of the empress, the third and fourth princes. The first prince led the remaining troops to the more desolate desert. If he wanted to restore his former glory, he would need to recuperate for several decades. Yu Pinyin cleaned up the battlefield and rewarded the officers and soldiers. Only then did he write a letter to Emperor Qing Kong to report his victory. Emperor Qing Kong received a secret report from the Dragon Scale Guard. He was overjoyed and ordered him to immediately return to the capital. However, he did not announce this good news to the outside world. He only sent someone to inform the imprisoned crown prince. The current imperial court of the Great Han Dynasty was also in chaos. The crown prince's officials were impeached and attacked every day. The days were very difficult. The fifth prince and the sixth prince, who had always been mediocre, suddenly became active. They won over a large number of officials to speak for the new crown prince. On one hand, they tried to curry favor with their imperial father. On the other hand, they attacked each other. Emperor Qing Kong coldly watched and shook his head at the performance of the two princes. The person who could slowly infiltrate the Dragon Scale Guard and defeat the Crown Prince and Yu Pinyin in one fell swoop should not be so impetuous. The mastermind behind the scenes was not the two princes. On the contrary, the fourth prince had remained silent from beginning to end. He did not win over the officials, nor did he deliberately curry favor with him. Instead, he did his best to plead for mercy for the crown prince and Upinion. He did not forget to visit the crown prince every day, causing the officials who supported the crown prince to turn to him. Because only when the fourth prince, who was related to the crown prince, ascended to the throne would they have a chance to survive. His performance could be said to be perfect, but the more perfect it was, the more suspicious it was. To be able to rope in nearly half of the officials in the imperial court without making a sound and without causing the fifth prince and the sixth prince to feel apprehensive, his methods were truly shrewd and ruthless. Emperor Chen Kang's vigilance towards his son had been raised to the extreme. If it wasn't for the crown prince's foresight, and if it wasn't for Upinion's luck, he would have fallen into this elaborate trap. First, he would have abandoned the crown prince. When he came back to his senses, he would have abandoned the fifth prince and the sixth prince. Then, he would have naturally passed the throne to this filial son. Emperor Chen Kang's methods were shrewd and ruthless, and his eyes were sharp. How could the young fourth prince compare to him? He didn't need any evidence. Just based on intuition and conjecture, he had already determined the real culprit. He also sent secret troops to closely monitor the fourth prince. He didn't care about the disputes in the imperial court. He only wanted to coldly distinguish who was loyal and who was treacherous among the officials. When Upinion returned to the imperial court, he would use those who needed to be used, and clean up those who needed to be cleaned up. He would hand over a clean imperial court to the crown prince. His life's work could be considered complete. When Upinion received the secret edict, he immediately summoned all the generals to discuss the matter of returning to the capital. Su Mao refused to confess. Even when Upinion personally interrogated him, he clenched his teeth and didn't say a word. He even bit his tongue several times to commit suicide. Fortunately, someone discovered him in time and removed his lower jaw, saving his life. Upinion had no choice but to lock him in a cage and bring him back to the capital for Emperor Chen Kang to make a decision. After confirming the time to break camp and return to the capital with the generals, he walked towards the small courtyard bathed in the afterglow of the setting sun. The courtyard was filled with the aroma of food. Tao Hong and Lu Lu placed the bowls and plates on the Kong table. Yu Xiang walked out of the kitchen with an apron tied around her waist and a bit of black dust stuck to the tip of her nose. Seeing her brother, her eyes lit up. She greeted him with a smile. "You came back at the right time. I was just about to ask Tao Hong to call you for lunch." At noon, Master Kuhai and Master Ku Hui came to say goodbye to you. They said they were going to Guyu country to cultivate. Since you weren't here, I had people prepare a lot of dry rations and monk robes. I also sent a group of soldiers to send them to the border. Upinion skillfully hugged her slender waist and used his finger to rub the tip of her nose. He smiled and said, "Then I've been rude. When we return to the capital, help me go to the Zhenghua temple and add more incense to it." "Okay, I'll do it." Yu Xiang nodded. She pulled her brother to the Kong table and sat down. She wrapped the thinly sliced roast duck, cucumber, shredded onions, peanut butter, and other ingredients into a large pancake and rolled it up. Upinion looked at the large pancake that was about to be fed to his lips. His expression was slightly hesitant. "What's wrong?" Yu Xiang blinked her eyes in confusion. Upinion took a bite and said softly, "Xiang'er, it seems like we've been eating large pancakes for more than 2 months. Shouldn't we change to something else?" "I've changed." Yu Xiang tapped her bowl with her chopsticks and said, "The day before yesterday, we ate beef rolls. Yesterday, we ate chicken rolls. Today, we ate duck rolls. Every day, we make different things. How can we change?" "I'm asking if we can change it to something like rice or stir-fry," Upinion suggested. Yu Xiang was silent. She stole a few glances at him before she reluctantly said, I want to change, but I only know how to make pancakes. I don't know how to cook other dishes. I can't cook meat properly, and I always burn vegetables. Sometimes, I cook rice into thin porridge, and sometimes I cook rice crust. It's not presentable at all. I'm still learning. I used to be such a delicate porcelain doll. Because of you, I'm even getting calluses on my fingers. What are you still dissatisfied with? As she spoke, she felt wronged. She spread her white and tender hands on the table. Yu Pinyin took her hands and looked. Sure enough, there were some places where her skin was scraped. His heart instantly ached. He pulled her onto his lap and kissed and coaxed her. My little sweetheart, don't do these things anymore. Let Tao Hong and Lulu take care of you. A porcelain doll like you should be held in my arms and pampered every day. As he spoke, he kissed all 10 of her fingers. His actions were indescribably gentle. But I like to wash my hands and make soup for you. Isn't this the duty of a wife? Yu Xiang was no longer wronged. She snuggled into her brother's arms. Whatever you like. I'll eat whatever you make. I'll eat pancakes you make for the rest of my life. Yu Pinyin smiled happily. He never knew that he could say such mushy words of love. However, when it came to his sister, making her happy seemed to be a kind of duty and instinct. Yu Xiang glared at him and snorted. She was clearly very happy, but she had to put on a front. Yu Pinyin loved her little appearance to death. His large hand reached under her clothes and stroked the soft flesh of her waist. He kneaded her into a puddle of spring water and melted her into his arms. The two of them kicked the Kong table away and hugged each other. When they were done, Yu Xiang was already as soft as mud. She could only rest her head on her jade arm and gasp for breath. Yu Pinyin twisted the handkerchief to help her tidy up, but her naughty little foot kicked the soft part of his body. He immediately felt it again. Little devil, you still want me to tidy you up? He gritted his teeth and whispered. We have to leave tomorrow. The journey is inconvenient. I need to eat more. Yu Xiang licked her dark red lips. Her charming eyes hooked towards her brother. She had always been carefree. She lived as she pleased and didn't care about feudal etiquette at all. She had just experienced the joy of the pleasure of fish and water. Naturally, she didn't feel satisfied no matter how much she enjoyed it. What Yu Pinyin loved the most was her fiery passion. She was frank and straightforward. He chuckled and pressed down on her. The two of them were still on their way back to the capital when there was a new disturbance in the court. Because the Prime Minister was the backbone of the Crown Prince's support, if the other princes wanted to ascend the throne, they naturally had to remove this block. Under the incitement of the princes, memorials to impeach the Prime Minister flew like snowflakes to Emperor Cheng Kang's desk. Among them, there was one that caught the attention of Emperor Cheng Kang. It was to reverse the verdict of Yu Junwei, who had been exiled to Shu. Yu Junwei was Yu Pinyin's third uncle. He was the son of a concubine of the matriarch. In the past, he had been the Minister of Appointments. Later, the Prime Minister impeached him for selling his position and accepting bribes. After his crimes were verified, his entire family was exiled. The witness from that year unexpectedly retracted his testimony, saying that everything was fabricated by Yu Pinyin and the Crown Prince in order to seize the title of nobility. Because his entire family's lives were in the hands of Yu Pinyin, he had no choice but to go against his conscience and frame a loyal subject. Now that Yu Pinyin was dead, the threat to his family had been removed. Only then did he stand up to atone for his past crimes. When this matter spread, it caused an uproar in the imperial court. Many people impeached the Prime Minister and Marquis Yongle. Even Marquis Yongle's birth mother, the Lin clan, stood up to testify for Yu Pinyin's family. They described in detail how Yu Pinyin had fabricated all sorts of crimes to frame his uncle. When the matriarch heard the news, she was so angry that she vomited blood. Yu Siyu wanted nothing more than to burn down the Lin residence. Fortunately, she was pulled back by Mama Ma. In the Crown Prince mansion, Emperor Cheng Kong and the Crown Prince were playing chess. Emperor Cheng Kong placed down a chess piece and sighed. Ifong really has poor affinity with his parents. He was actually framed by his own birth mother to this extent. What exactly is the Lin clan thinking? I don't know. They've probably gone crazy. The Crown Prince rubbed his temples in distress. Emperor Cheng Kong lowered his head and drank tea. He said, Old Fourth is coming more and more frequently. The Crown Prince sneered, that's right. His words are full of encouragement and consolation. I'm very moved. I've advised him many times to fight for that position, but he refused to comment. Emperor Cheng Kong also laughed. He ate a chess piece and said in a fleeting tone, he's waiting for you to surrender. What's the point of your mouth moving up and down? It was time to give him something substantial. If you don't use your connections now, they'll be useless in the future. If Old Fifth and Old Sixth take the throne, you'll definitely die. That's why I can only rely on Fourth Brother now. Only when Fourth Brother takes the throne can I live. Don't you think so, Father? The Crown Prince's tone was light. Emperor Cheng Kong nodded, his eyes full of murderous intent. The memorial to overturn Yu Junwei's case was quickly approved by Emperor Cheng Kong. Not only did he imprison the Prime Minister on the same day, he also sent people to Shu to bring Yu Junwei's family back to the capital. This matter quickly spread to everyone. They all said that Family Yu's third branch's suffering was finally over. If things went smoothly, not only would Yu Junwei be reinstated, he might even inherit the title of Marquis Yongle. Chapter 127. Yu Pinyin led the army back to the capital and did not show his face all the way. Because Emperor Cheng Kong deliberately blocked the news, no one knew that the Westerny people were about to be exterminated by other tribes. The courtiers thought about the army the most every day. Today you impeach me, tomorrow I impeach you. They were all fighting endlessly for the merit of ascending to the throne. Emperor Cheng Kong was very happy to see this, but in fact, the butcher knife in his hand was already raised high. The army would arrive at the capital in a few days. Yu Pinyin had no choice but to send his sister back first to deceive others. As the two of them talked, they kissed again. Just saying goodbye took almost an hour. It was only when Liulu risked her life to urge the two of them to separate. Because she was a girl, she could not always live in Zhenguo Temple. Therefore, 2 months after she left, Shen Yuanqi ordered a servant to disguise as her and return to the Shenfu. Then, he announced to the public that his sister was seriously ill and refused to see guests. Yu Xiang sneaked into the Shenfu through the corner gate and saw Shen Yuanqi staring at her with a dark expression. You're back. He walked over and looked at his sister from head to toe. Are you well? I'm well, I can't be better. Yu Xiang smiled with squinted eyes. Shen Yuanqi could not bear to see her sweet appearance and scolded with a fierce face, quickly freshen up and go out to see the 9th princess. Little Jiu, why are you here? Didn't you say that I was seriously ill and refused to see guests? The 9th princess's body is priceless. If she insists on coming in, how can I stop her? Shen Yuanqi's dark expression faintly revealed a smile, and his tone softened. The 9th princess is loyal and righteous. After knowing the truth, she tried her best to cover it up for you. Thanks to her frequent visits to you these past few months, no one suspected anything. Otherwise, if word got out, your reputation would be ruined. If they want to say it, let them say it. I won't lose a piece of meat. Anyway, no matter what others say, Big Brother will never abandon me. Seeing his brother glaring at him, Yu Xiang hurriedly changed his words. But I still have to thank little Jill, I'll clean up and go see her. Only then was Shen Yuanqi satisfied. He went to the side hall to report to the 9th princess. Because the 9th princess would visit the Fu every 3 to 5 days, and because his younger sister wasn't here, he couldn't just let her sit there and do nothing. Therefore, Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to put aside the etiquette between men and women and talk to her. Over time, he actually began to like the innocent the ninth princess a lot more. Time was short, so Yu Xiang only washed his face, changed his clothes, and hurried to the side hall, just in time to hear the ninth princess giggling happily. Before she left, she mumbled that she would come back tomorrow. After Yu Xiang returned to her room, she immediately took a fragrant flower petal bath. In front of the mirror, she fiddled with the rouge, pearls, hairpins, and other things that she hadn't touched for a long time. "Help me apply some nail polish." She placed her hands on the dressing table. Tao Hong and Lulu hurriedly took out small bowls to make balsam flower juice. When they smelled the refreshing fragrance, they suddenly felt as if they were in another world. After applying the nail polish, Liulu, on the spur of the moment, helped her mistress comb her hair into a very delicate and complicated bun. She specially picked out that gorgeous pearl hairpin and inserted it into the bun. She also picked out a bright red silk long dress for her mistress to change into. After Yu Xiang was properly dressed, she drew her eyebrows and lips in front of the mirror. She held a thin sheep hair brush and dipped it in wax and gold powder. Then, she drew a blooming lotus between her eyebrows. She raised her eyebrows slightly and turned to Tao Hong, asking, "How is it? Am I beautiful?" After rushing about outside for several months, your mistress's appearance hasn't deteriorated, right? Not only hasn't it deteriorated, miss, you've become much more beautiful. I'm simply stunned. Tao Hong gave her 2 thumbs up. Lulu pursed her lips and smiled. Being too beautiful is also a kind of sin. My legs have to be good and bad sometimes. Otherwise, if they're too eye-catching, they'll attract trouble. Yu Xiang held her cheeks and sighed with a smile. The corners of Lulu's lips twitched slightly. What you said really came true. One moment Yu Xiang said that she would attract trouble, the next moment, a little girl came to report that the Sun family had come again. Because of Madame Sun's arrangements, that girl died and left behind a blood letter. However, for the sake of 500 taels of silver and dozens of mu of fertile land, her family refused to help her redress her grievances. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to continue blackmailing the Sun family, they would have burned the blood letter as well. Shen Yuanqi found that family several times. As soon as he said the words redress her grievances, they cried and made a fuss. They would rather die than comply. Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to pinch his nose and admit it. Who knew that even though he admitted it, Sun Mingjie wouldn't admit it? He had long coveted Yu Xiang's beauty, and considering that she had broken her legs, he could do whatever he wanted with her in bed. If she died, he could just say that she was weak and died of illness. There was simply no more suitable wife candidate than her. Therefore, Sun Mingjie refused to give up and sent Iceman to propose marriage again and again. At first, they were polite, but after Shen Yuanqi was suspended for pleading for the crown prince, the Sun family became arrogant and said that they wanted to take Yu Xiang as a concubine, which made Shen Yuanqi so angry that he almost vomited blood. Yu Xiang listened to the little girl explain the whole story in a few words and walked to the front hall angrily. As soon as she stepped through the threshold, she heard Iceman sneer and say, "Lord Shen, hurry up and agree. If you pass this village, there won't be such a shop. Young Master Sun has now taken up a job in the Ministry of Personnel. Not only is he handsome and elegant, but he also has a great future in front of him. On the other hand, what else does your young miss have besides her looks? Not only is she eccentric, but she also can't walk. Although she has been cured, she can't walk as well as ordinary people. You are still the minister of the Supreme Court. In the future, when the emperor demotes you, it will be extremely difficult to marry your young miss into a family like the Sun family. Because most of the officials in the crown prince's line were abandoned by the emperor, and the prime minister's future was uncertain in the imperial prison, Shen Yuanqi, a foot soldier, would be demoted sooner or later in the eyes of the world. Therefore, this Iceman not only didn't have any respect for Shen Yuanqi, but also faintly despised him. Before Shen Yuanqi could speak, Yu Xiang sneered and asked, "You want me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture, to be a concubine of a lowly official? Where did he get the face to do that? Why don't we go to the palace tomorrow with Madam's son to see the Empress and ask her if there is a precedent of a Minister of Agriculture being a concubine of a sixth-ranked official in our country? If there is, I have no other choice but to marry into the Sun family. I will have someone send a letter to the Empress to ask for an audience. You go back and tell her that I will be waiting for Madam's son at the palace gate tomorrow morning. I won't leave until I see her." The bright red brocade robe was blown up and down by the wind, and a strong fragrance hit the face, making people intoxicated. The young girl was originally bright and beautiful, and at this time, her eyes were flashing with anger, making the golden lotus between her eyebrows seem to be burning. This was a kind of breathtaking beauty. Just looking at her, it was as if the eyes were stabbed by a knife, and it was very painful. Iceman subconsciously stood up to greet her, and the arrogance on her face was replaced by fear. How could an ordinary person touch a young girl who was as hot as fire? She couldn't help but think to herself. When she understood the meaning of her words, she was even more scared out of her wits. Family Yu and family Shen were in dire straits, so everyone forgot the identity of Yu Xiang as the Minister of Agriculture. Now that she mentioned it, Iceman thought of this and secretly complained in her heart. It is this servant who is arrogant. How can the Minister of Agriculture be worthy of a mediocre person like young Master Sun? This servant will go back to Madame Sunday. Please don't blame me. Iceman apologized and retreated. As for the appointment to see the Empress tomorrow morning, it was not something she could solve. It was better to let Madame Sun have a headache. She could provoke anyone, but she had to provoke the famous Miss 3U. Although she had changed her surname, her temper had not changed at all. The 9th princess was protecting her. No matter how poor she was not someone who could be bullied by ordinary people. Iceman regretted it, for fear that Yu Xiang would raise her whip and whip her. Fortunately, the Lord Shen stopped her and let her escape unscathed. People are bullying you. Why are you still being a good person? Yu Xiang glared at her brother fiercely. Chapter 128. Yu Xiang and her elder brother sat down to chat. Only then did she know that the Lin clan had helped the third branch to defame Yu Pinyin. She was so angry that she almost broke her teeth. Now, the third branch has been in the capital for almost a month. They live in the courtyard across from Marquis Yongla. Every day, they run around for the sake of redressing their names. In order to overthrow the Prime Minister and completely eliminate the Crown Prince's power in the court, the supporters of the 5th and 6th princes are doing their best to promote this matter. Many people say that not only will Yu Junwei be reinstated, but he will also inherit the title of Marquis Yongla. His eldest son's scholarly achievements will also be restored. In the future, the third branch will be the most prominent branch in Prefecture Yu. The clansmen who were punished by Yu Pinyin are now gathered around Yu Junwei. They have the momentum to support him as the clan leader. He is not as ruthless as Yu Pinyin. After returning, he took the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi into the Fu to take care of them. He also visits old Madam every day, saying that he wants to provide for her. Shen Yuanqi slowly narrated the family Yu's recent situation. Yu Xiang's fingertips trembled as she listened. She fiercely said, "What a good third branch. They are deliberately angering the old ancestor. They are so savage before they have the power. In the future, they will cry. I always thought that the Lin clan still had some feelings for older brother. I didn't expect that as soon as she learned of older brother's death, she would defame his reputation. Does she treat older brother as a son or an enemy? Even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. She is worse than a beast. Shen Yuanqi was extremely disdainful of the Lin clan's actions. However, he also felt that it was unfair for his younger sister to favor one and discriminate against the other. He ridiculed, "Yu Pinyin has a mother worse than a beast and a sister who is fickle and unjust." The heavens saw that he was pitiful and helped him by giving him a child bride who is affectionate and righteous. I, Shen Yuanqi, am the most pitiful. I only have a relative who always favors outsiders. She leaves far away without saying a word. It makes me worry every day and unable to sleep. Yu Xiang felt very apologetic after hearing what he said. She hurriedly hugged him and teased him. The longer the brother and sister got along, the more they felt that their personalities were congenial to each other. Their initial restraint and alienation had long since been replaced by intimacy. After Yu Xiang coaxed his brother, he immediately prepared a gift and went to the suburbs of the capital to visit the old lady. On the other side, Yu Miaoqi was dressing up in her room. Behind her stood two beautiful maidservants, both of whom were bought by Yu Junwei's wife, Madame Zhuo. "Miss, which one of these head ornaments do you like?" The matriarch was drinking medicine. When she saw who it was, she directly threw the medicine bowl at them and cursed, "Slut, you still dare to come. Mother, calm down. Don't vomit blood like last time. Look at what kind of place you're living in. The walls are moldy. Why don't you come home with me?" Master received news that in 3 days, the edict to reinstate his position and inherit his title will be issued. The seal on Marquis Yongla's door can also be opened. You've lived there your whole life. It's time for you to go back. Madame Zhuo dodged the medicine bowl and sat in a taisha chair, talking to herself. "Grandmother, no matter who is in charge of the Marquis household, you are still our elder. We will definitely be filial to you. Although eldest brother has passed away, there is still brother Hong. Both of them are your grandsons." Yu Miaoqi sat next to Madame Zhuo and smiled faintly. The brother Hong she spoke of was Yu Junwei's legitimate son, Yu Pinhong. Right now, he was studying at home, preparing to return to his official career. The matriarch was so angry at these two that her heart ached. She roared, "Someone come, beat these two damn things out of here." However, the servants of the Marquis household had either left or scattered. The remaining people were the elderly, the weak, the women, and the children. They were really powerless against the young servants brought by the third branch. The servants pushed and shoved each other. Yu Miaoqi and Madame Zhuo were still in the mood to drink tea and watch the show. When Yu Siyu heard the news, she hurried over. Just as she reached the fork in the road, she saw the door open again. Yu Xiang, wearing a bright red silk dress embroidered with golden silk, slowly walked in. A gust of wind blew, blowing the strong scent of flowers onto Yu Siyu's face. She involuntarily took a deep breath and shouted in surprise, "Xiang-er. You're back." "I'm back." Yu Xiang was about to raise her lips when she heard the noise in the inner hall. Her face immediately darkened. "Who has the guts to fight with my old ancestor?" She untied the barbed whip from her waist and fiercely whipped at a servant. That person immediately covered his face and howled miserably. Blood flowed out from between his fingers. Everyone was silent for a moment. They involuntarily opened up a path for her to walk to the front of the hall. "Xiang-er. Is that you, Xiang-er?" The matriarch stared at her in disbelief. "It's me. Old ancestor, I've come to see you." She quickly stepped forward and hugged the matriarch. She leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Gage is also fine. Now that he has defeated Shi, he will return to the capital the day after tomorrow. The emperor has his own arrangements. You must not say anything right now." The matriarch trembled. She immediately hugged her and cried bitterly. She cried and repented, "Xiang-er, it's good that you can come to see me. I'm old and muddle-headed, that's why I did something wrong. You must not hold a grudge against me." How could I? I can hold a grudge against anyone, but I can't hold a grudge against my own old ancestor. We will always be a family. Yuxiang also felt something in her heart, and her eyes slowly turned red. Yu Siyu pushed away the servants and walked over. The three of them hugged each other and cried bitterly. Yuxiang, you're finally here. I thought you didn't plan on recognizing your grandmother in this lifetime. Yu Miaoqi broke the reunion scene of the three people. A few days ago, my leg injury relapsed and I urgently needed to seek medical treatment, so I was delayed for a few months. I'm not like you, an ungrateful and heartless white-eyed wolf. Yuxiang helped the matriarch sit up straight and helped her pour a cup of ginseng tea. Only then did she slowly open her mouth. Yu Miaoqi angrily glared. Just as she was about to refute, she heard Madame Zhua sneer, Yuxiang, oh no, look at my memory. You should be called Shenxiang now. Your surname is Shen, and our surname is Yu. What right do you have to meddle in family use matters? You even injured my family's servants the moment you arrived. You're really shameless. Do you really think you're the Marquis Yongla's D Miss Third? I don't think I'm the Marquis household's D Miss Third. I only think of myself as the Marquis household's official Marchioness. Of course, Yuxiang still couldn't say this out loud. She could only cover her mouth and laugh. I really do have a big face. Madame Zhua, have you forgotten? Although I'm no longer the Marquis household's D Missy, I still have the title of Minister of Agriculture above my head. If we're talking about rank, you have to kneel and salute when you see me. Chapter 129. Yuxiang had been in seclusion for several months. Outsiders thought that she had lost her status as the D-Miss of the Marquis household, so she was ashamed to see people. However, they all forgot that although the D-Miss of the Marquis household had a high status, it was not higher than the village lord. The emperor had never issued an edict to strip her of her title, so she was still the village lord. Ordinary women like Madame Zhua and Yu Miaoqi, who had no rank or rank, had to kneel and greet her as the village lord Nyang Nyang. At this time, the two of them were struggling between kneeling and not kneeling. Their facial features were twisted with resentment and unwillingness, making them look very terrifying. Yuxiang slowly fed the old Tai tea. After a while, she berated in a deep voice, these brats don't know etiquette. Beat them out of here. Mama Ma and the others seemed to have found their backbone. They picked up sticks, brooms, feather dusters, and other things, and aggressively beat them up. Madame Zhua could not order the servants to fight back. If they bumped into Yuxiang in the chaos, the matter would become big. She could only lift her skirt and run away with her tail between her legs. Yuxiang was still unwilling to give up. She shouted at their fleeing figures, Madame Zhua, I'll kindly warn you. Yu Miaoqi killed her adoptive mother, secretly harmed her adoptive brother, framed her D-sister, and colluded with her biological mother to frame her D-brother. Her coldness and viciousness are rarely seen in the world. If you have any intentions of using her, be careful that in the end, you'll be eaten by her until not even your bones are left. Madame Zhua's footsteps paused. When she crossed the threshold, she tripped. Yu Miaoqi quickly reached out to help her, but she slapped her hand away. It was clear that her words had already entered her heart. However, Yu Miaoqi urgently needed the third branch's power to help her ascend to the position of imperial concubine. When she returned, she would rack her brains to curry favor. If she could not make her lower her guard, then the family Yu would change the person she sent into the palace. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank could be overturned because of these words. Yu Miaoqi's hatred for Yuxiang could be imagined. She had made up her mind to make Yuxiang suffer a fate worse than death once she achieved meteoric success. When everyone had left, the old lady hugged her granddaughter in her arms again and patted her. She called her darling non-stop and repeatedly asked if she had suffered along the way. With the care of Master Kuhai and Master Ku Hui, your granddaughter didn't suffer. Gage is also doing very well. He will arrive in the capital in a few days. Yu Xiang told the old lady everything that had happened after he left for Shijiang. The old lady's tears kept flowing as she said firmly, "Okay, okay, okay. It doesn't matter if you win or lose on the battlefield, as long as you can go home safely, it's fine. In the future, old ancestor will go to the Zhenghua temple to ask for an auspicious day for you and Yan to hold your wedding ceremony. I have already spoken with the Lord Shen. I will pay for the betrothal gifts and dowry. I will definitely let you have boundless glory with your red dowry. As for what sibling incest, let those mediocre people talk about it. We just have to care about living our lives." Yu Xiang was overjoyed. She hugged the old lady's neck and acted coquettishly, "Old ancestor, you still love me. In the future, I will definitely help you give birth to a nest of great-grandchildren. We will have 4 generations under the same roof. What do you say?" The old lady's heart was filled with sweetness. She smiled until her eyes couldn't be seen and repeatedly agreed. Yu Xiu also smiled, but 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. The old lady was very distressed when she saw this and hurriedly hugged her to comfort her. "Xiao Xianzai, that child is affectionate. I think he is a good person. When your eldest brother comes back, we will hold your wedding again. It will be 100 times grander and livelier than before. Our whole family will borrow your happy occasion to wash away the bad luck." Yu Xiu hurriedly lowered her head to wipe her tears. After Zhuoshi returned home, she immediately left Shen Miaoqi and went to find Yu Junwei. The two previously saw that the noble person had a bit of interest in Yu Miaoqi and thus chose to send her over. Now that Yu Xiang pointed it out, they realized how ungrateful Yu Miaoqi was. Even her adoptive father, adoptive mother, adoptive brother, legitimate sister, and legitimate grandmother did not even blink an eye. Her heart was simply made of stone and could not be warmed no matter what. Now that she was in dire straits, she would naturally be gentle and obedient. When she gained power, she might stab her in the back. After staying in Shu for so long, my brain has also been damaged by the hard work. I actually thought of sending her over. Yu Junwei looked at his calloused hands and sighed. After 6 to 7 years of hard labor, he had even forgotten the art of observing people. Then let's choose someone else. There is no one more beautiful than her in the clan. Let's go outside and find someone or adopt a talented child from a branch family for a few years. If you return to your official position, the noble person will need to rely on you. Even if you don't mention it, he will ask himself. In any case, the noble person is still young and is not in a hurry. Zhuoshi's face showed a hint of arrogance. Yu Junwei was a Shu son and relied on his own ability to participate in the imperial examinations and become an official. At the age of 30, he became the Minister of Appointments. His ability was not to be doubted. If he was not too conceited and greedy, he would not have been pulled down by others. In order to stabilize the throne, the new emperor had to take in a few daughters of the influential families into the palace. The important position of the Minister of Appointments naturally had to be shared. Yu Junwei thought that when he became the emperor's father-in-law, it would be difficult for others to take him down. Moreover, he had the intention of using the Lin clan. Thus, he pinched his nose and took in the mother and daughter pair. Now that he had new considerations, he felt very uncomfortable and said, "That old thing seems to have already divorced the Lin clan. Then our family Yu has no obligation to support her. When the noble person is done, you can send them far away." "I know." Zhuoshi nodded and hurried down to find a beautiful young girl. Yu Miaoqi heard that Zhuoshi had summoned the clansmen to see him, and each of them brought their own daughters. They were all between the ages of 11 and 12. How could he not understand what she was planning? He was so angry that his eyes turned red. However, the noble person had repeatedly warned her not to meet him before the great cause was accomplished. She could only grit her teeth and endure. In her heart, she was only thinking that the noble person was still thinking about her. When Upinion was here, she felt very humble. Without Upinion, she found that she was as humble as dust. Like her, Madame Sun was also unable to calm down. After hearing Iceman's report, she remembered that Yu Xiang still had the title of Minister of Agriculture. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. "Mother, why are you in such a hurry? The crown prince has been imprisoned, and the empress is in seclusion. Kuan Ning Palace refuses to see guests. The two of them couldn't even protect themselves. How could they care about the family Shin's business? Let her go. Let's see what she can come up with. I like such a strong woman. It's fun to play with." Sun Mingjie licked his fingertips. His feminine face had a bit of ruthlessness. Madame Sun felt relieved when she heard this. She sneered and said, "My son is right. She went to beg the empress, and I went to beg my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is deeply favored by the emperor and is pregnant with the emperor's child. Could it be that she can't suppress an empress who is about to be deposed?" It turned out that the Lord's son also had a younger sister who was 16 years old. She entered the palace during the election last year. Because of her outstanding appearance, she was quickly bedded. Now, she was 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was pregnant with Emperor Cheng Kang's youngest child. Therefore, she was very favored by Emperor Cheng Kang. A month ago, she was promoted several ranks, from a small 5th-rank Liangyuan to a 1st-rank concubine. This was also why Madame Sun dared to be so rampant. The mother and son discussed the matter of entering the palace tomorrow without the Lord's son's knowledge. They wanted to ask for a marriage decree from Consort Sunday. Of course, no matter how bold they were, they didn't dare to take the emperor as a concubine. They planned to torture Yu Xiang to death and then marry another noble daughter. The next day, Yu Xiang was not surprised when he waited for Madame Sun at the palace gate. After the two entered the palace, they parted ways. One went to see Consort Sun, and the other went to see the empress. "You're finally back. Is Yifeng well? His Majesty and I are waiting for him to return to the capital." The empress was very happy to see Yu Xiang. She took his hand and asked. She was not curious about how Yu Xiang found Upinion. With Master Kohai leading the way, it seemed that nothing was impossible. Seeing that there was no one left and only Song Mama, who was deeply trusted by the empress, was standing in the corner, Yu Xiang said in a low voice, "Brother is very well. He should be able to arrive in the capital tomorrow." "Good, good, good." The empress smiled comfortably. Then her face darkened as she asked, "I heard Song Mama say that the Sun family wants to take you as a concubine." "That's right." Yu Xiang nodded. Ben Gong remembers that her son is currently working in the Ministry of Appointments. He's only a secondary class, 6th-rank minister counselor, yet he dares to take the emperor as a concubine. He really has a lot of face. Where's Consort Sun? Call her over. Ben Gong wants to ask her face to face where she wants to place the emperor's personal title of emperor. The empress's eyes were filled with anger. Replying Nyang, she went to see Consort Sun, Yu Xiang said bluntly. The empress's eyes were filled with anger. She said in a low voice, "Good, they didn't come to see Ben Gong first after entering the palace. Instead, they went to see Consort Sunday. They think that Ben Gong will be deposed if the crown prince falls, so they don't put Ben Gong in their eyes." The empress had suffered a lot in the past few months. Her son was inexplicably imprisoned. There were voices everywhere in the court calling for the crown prince to be deposed. Even the two little imperial grandsons were asked to be demoted to commoners. If it weren't for the fact that Upinion's victory over Shi made Emperor Cheng Kang so happy that he couldn't help but reveal the truth to the empress, she would still be in the dark and live her life with her tail between her legs. Tomorrow, Upinion would enter the capital. How could she endure it? She sneered, "Send someone to pass on an imperial decree. Say that consort's son doesn't know the rules. Order her to go to the temple and reflect on herself. She's not allowed to get up until she kneels for 12 hours. Song Mama hesitated, but Nyang, consort's son is already 8 months pregnant. Normal people can't stand kneeling for 12 hours. She's a pregnant woman, she might, just go, don't worry about anything else." The Empress waved her hand impatiently. It was true that consort's son was pregnant with the imperial seed, but this child wasn't as favored by Emperor Qingkong as the rumor said. It turned out that consort's son had studied medicine since she was a child and had the ability to feel one's pulse. When Emperor Qingkong was selecting consorts, he helped her up, and she felt his pulse. Unexpectedly, she found out that he was seriously ill and was nearing the end of his lifespan. She entered the palace to seek a bright future, not to be buried with him. Thus, she made some aphrodisiac medicine and had Emperor Qingkong drink it. After a few entanglements, she became pregnant. If not for this, how could Emperor Qingkong, who was so ill, be able to walk around? She originally thought that if she had a child, she wouldn't need to be buried with him. If she gave birth to a prince, she could live outside the palace with him. Who knew that she would inadvertently reveal this matter to consort's son, and in a panic, consort's son would reveal it to her son. Sun Mingjie was smart and immediately realized that this was a great opportunity for political investment. Gradually, he became acquainted with the fourth prince. Since then, consort's son had no choice but to pass on information to the fourth prince for her own life and the future of her child. After Emperor Qingkong investigated Chief Physician Su and found that he wasn't a suspect, he turned his attention to the imperial concubines in the harem. Consort's son, who could unexpectedly become pregnant when he was so weak, was like a firefly in the night, with nowhere to hide. Now that Yu Pinyin was coming back, Emperor Qingkong would soon clean up the court. Naturally, the child in consort's son's belly couldn't be kept. After all, she was pregnant with a dragon's child. She couldn't let it fall to its death again, right? The Empress had endured for a long time. Just as she was thinking about how to deal with consort's son, Yu Xiang handed her a knife. It was really to her liking. This time, not only could she get rid of a future trouble, but she could also intimidate the restless imperial concubines. It was killing several birds with one stone. The Empress naturally wouldn't tell Yu Xiang about the dark secrets of the harem. Yu Xiang saw that the Empress had schemed against both the adult and the child in one move, and she didn't hide it at all. After thinking a little, he knew that the Empress was calm and wouldn't act so recklessly. Consort's son must have stepped on her, or even Emperor Qingkang's bottom line. Since the Empress dared to do it, she definitely wasn't afraid of Emperor Qingkong holding her accountable. Chapter 131. The strength of a royal guard staff was not something that an ordinary person could withstand. After 30 hits, Lady Sun was already half dead. She also heard that consort's son was currently kneeling in the temple to reflect on herself. In 24 hours, the dragon fetus would definitely be lost, and there was even a possibility of 2 lives. She had entered the palace this time for her son's marriage, but she did not expect that not only was the marriage ruined, even the pillar of the Sun family had fallen. Lady Sun simply could not understand what had happened. Her sister-in-law was clearly so favored, and the emperor had promised that as long as she gave birth to a dragon child, he would immediately make her a Qinhuang. Why did he want to kill her sister-in-law in the blink of an eye? Lady Sun was not stupid. How could she not see that the emperor and empress were working together to punish her sister-in-law? Her body hurt like it was being torn apart, but the anxiety in her heart was worse than the pain in her body. She wanted to immediately return to the Fu and have a good discussion with her son. She felt that the emperor's sudden change in attitude was not a good sign, as if the sky of the great Han dynasty was about to change. Lady Sun, has the imperial decree for the marriage arrived? If it has, then give it to me so that I can go back and prepare the dowry. The family Shen's carriage was across the road. Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and smiled brightly. My family's madam is seriously ill. Miss Shen, please make way. A maidservant lifted the curtain and said politely. Seriously ill? Didn't you have your pants taken off and beaten? There are so many guards in front of the hall. Madam, you're really not embarrassed to have your lower body exposed in broad daylight. If it were me, I would be embarrassed to death. Yu Xiang did not deliberately lower his voice. This was also the main road of the palace. The people passing by were all high officials and nobles. Hearing this, they all turned to look. Lady Sun, who was already at her last breath, was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She shouted herself hoarse, go back to the Fu. Hurry. She felt like she had died if she stayed here for a moment longer. Make way, she's in a hurry to go back. Yu Xiang waved his hand at the carriage driver. The carriage driver immediately moved out of the way. He watched as the Sun family's carriage quickly disappeared among the pointing fingers. Yu Xiang put down the curtain, held a small hand warmer, and said, let's go. There is still a big show waiting for us in the Sun family. When Tao Hong heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. He urged the coachman to speed up. On the other hand, Lulu looked helpless. The two carriages arrived at the Sun residence one after the other. The gatekeeper had already received the news and sent someone to bring a bamboo bed out to receive the madam. The Lord's son was still working at the yamen, and the son Mingjie was on vacation. When he heard that his mother had gone to the palace, not only did she fail to ask for the empress's decree, she was even punished with a plank. He had been waiting at the corner gate for a long time, and a few drops of sweat could be seen on his forehead. To be punished by Emperor Qing Kong personally, and to be punished in front of so many guards in Yangxin Palace Hall, his mother must have caused a lot of trouble. Right now, Concubine's son was still kneeling in the ice-cold Buddhist temple. It was easy to predict what would happen in 24 hours. He wasn't a fool, and he had already considered the worst possible outcome. It's coming, it's coming. Quickly go and pick up madam. When the servant saw the carriage, he hurriedly carried the bamboo bed covered with thick and heavy bedding over. Mother, how are you? How is Her Highness? What exactly happened to make His Majesty so angry? Sun Mingjie held Madame Sun's hand and asked repeatedly. You are Sun Mingjie? A clear voice came from the carriage behind them. Sun Mingjie turned his head and looked back. What he saw was the beautiful figure that he had played with countless times in his dreams. At this time, that person's chin was slightly raised, and her expression was arrogant. Her bright red lips spat out hurtful words, with your appearance that is neither male nor female, you dare to covet me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture. Why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? Do you think you're worthy? Sun Mingjie hated it when others called him a man with a feminine appearance. He glared at her with bloodshot eyes, and a murderous look appeared between his brows. Yu Xiang smiled contemptuously and waved his sleeve, don't glare. Even if you glare, I won't lose a piece of flesh. I have something here for you. Please accept it. As soon as her voice fell, she saw another carriage in front of them. Several strong servants came down carrying a huge iron cage. Inside it was a pure white swan and several hundred toads. She had gone through a lot of trouble to find so many toads in the middle of winter and even put them on the fire cage to smoke them awake. Toads were supposed to be the food of swans, but there were too many toads in the cage. They were densely packed together, and the sight was full of white, venomous lumps of flesh. Even a human would feel terrified just looking at them, not to mention the swans in the middle of them. That swan raised its long neck and let out a shrill cry. The high volume attracted all the passers-by. Everyone looked at Yu Xiang, who was leaning against the car window and smiling brightly. They all wondered, which unlucky guy messed with this devil again. In terms of temperament, all the dandy young masters in the capital couldn't compare to this family Yu. Oh no, this young miss of the family Shen. Sun Mingjie stared at the iron cage, gritted his teeth, and asked, Miss Shen, what do you mean? Sending these toads to disgust me? No, I just want to tell you a truth. Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows slightly and said in a light tone, this miss is a swan, and you are a toad on the ground. A toad wanting to eat swan meat is purely delusional. As soon as her voice fell, the servant opened the iron cage and threw it at the gate of the Sun residence. The helpless swan was freed and immediately flew into the sky. After a few long cries, it turned into a black dot and disappeared into the horizon. The toads couldn't fly, so they jumped in front of the gate of the Sun residence. Because of the poisonous mucus on their bodies, the servants of the Sun residence all avoided them. Someone knocked over the bamboo bed, causing Madame Sun to fall down and crush several toads to death. The scene was disgusting and funny. The onlookers roared with laughter. Sun Mingjie was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. If he had a sword in his hand, he would have already stabbed at Yu Xiang. After this, if anyone wanted to marry into a higher family, others would use the phrase, a toad wanting to eat swan meat, to ridicule him. Let's not talk about this for the time being. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Before he could react, the carriage disappeared around the corner of the street. Sun Mingjie's face was distorted and his voice was hoarse. He shouted with all his strength, Shen Xiang, if you offend me one day, I will make you beg for death. It was just catching a few toads to disgust people. Yu Xiang's method was no less than a child's prank in the eyes of the onlookers. However, Sun Mingjie's last declaration was a bit excessive. In addition, he always had the reputation of being an immortal young master. At this time, he revealed his sinister true colors, which surprised the crowd and made them talk about it. Those who were interested had already gone around to find out why the two families had a grudge, and they were even more disgusted with the Sun family's actions. When the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death came from the palace, everyone realized that the Sun family's good days were over. Lord Sun was very frightened, unprecedentedly frightened. First, he received an anonymous letter in the yamen. When he opened it, he found that it was a letter written in blood, which recorded his son's heinous crimes. Before he could go home to ask, news came from the inner palace. His wife was punished by the emperor with 30 strokes of the cane for making a racket in front of the palace. Consort Sun disobeyed the empress and was punished to reflect on her mistakes. He didn't dare to send people to the palace to inquire about the news. He could only resign and go home under the strange gazes of his colleagues. As soon as he stepped into the house, he received the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death. Now that Yu Junwei has a chance of being reinstated and inheriting his title, and Yu Pinhong has a chance of returning to his official career, she immediately came looking for him. After going around in circles, this pair of adulterous man and woman finally got together. Tao Hong had always loved to inquire about gossip, so he knew a lot about the third branch's family. He asked curiously, but Yu Pinhong already got married in Shu. The other party is an ordinary village woman. He even brought her back this time. Yu Xiang sneered and said, Yu Junwei is indeed a sanctimonious hypocrite. He clearly wants to kill his daughter-in-law, but he still brought her back to show that he is a man of honor. However, how can a village woman stand up to the marquis household? At this time, if he marries another wife for his son, others won't be able to find fault with him. Looking at all the noble ladies in the capital, who would be willing to be a second wife? Only someone like Chang Yafu, who comes from a noble family but has lost her reputation, is the most suitable candidate. At that time, I exposed Chang Yafu's secret, but I didn't expect that I would end up helping a pair of lovebirds. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. As she spoke, she poured out the melon seed shells in her hand. Coincidentally, Chang Yafu looked up. Her beautiful eyes widened, but soon after, she chuckled and mouthed silently, "Did you see that? I still became the Marquis, madam." Yu Xiang coldly glanced at her, then lowered the carriage curtain and said, "When brother comes back, I will immediately get married and let her know who the real Marquis madam is." Chapter 132. The Lord's son had spent his entire life studying agriculture and water conservancy. He didn't have any great ambitions, but he didn't expect to marry a stupid and greedy wife, give birth to an ambitious and tyrannical son, and have a younger sister who wanted to go to the imperial palace for riches and honor. The reputation of the Sun family for 5 generations was destroyed just like that, and he was powerless to reverse the situation. He could only make the best of it. In the past, the Lord's son would just stand among the officials and listen to them. He was very calm, but today, even the hand holding the ceremonial tablet was trembling. Cold sweat seeped out of the edge of his official's hat, dripping down from his hair and earlobes. He didn't dare to wipe it off, so he could only move slightly and hide behind the Minister of Works. When he looked up, he met the eyes of the 4th prince, who was walking forward leisurely. He was stunned by the burning desire in the 4th prince's eyes. "Lord's son, are you feeling unwell?" The 4th prince looked back and smiled. He was as elegant, benevolent, and generous as the rumor said. "Thank you for your concern, 4th prince. I've caught a cold, but it's nothing serious." The Lord's son lowered his head, not daring to look directly at the 4th prince. "The weather is cold. You should wear more clothes when you go out." The 4th prince said a few words of concern, then went to the front hall, where only the princes could stand. The 5th prince and the 6th prince also arrived. Although they smiled when they saw each other, their eyes flashed with daggers and swords. Some of the officials didn't look sideways, some were inattentive, and some were wild and restless. In short, today's court was still surging with undercurrents as usual, as if an ominous storm was brewing in the air. The arrival of Emperor Qing Kong made the already stagnant atmosphere even heavier. He said expressionlessly, "If there's something to report, then report. If there's nothing to report, then withdraw." The 5th prince and the 6th prince weren't willing to give up. They once again incited the officials to report that the crown prince should be deposed. However, they had been fighting for several months, but the crown prince was still sitting firmly on the throne. At this time, they were also a little anxious and said that the crown prince's crimes were unforgivable and should be executed, and that the 2 young imperial grandsons should be demoted to commoners. "Kill the crown prince?" Emperor Qing Kong repeated the court official's request word by word, his expression dark and gloomy. The Lord's son felt that the already cold air had condensed into grains of frost, and when he breathed it into his nostrils, it brought a piercing pain. He raised his eyes to look at the 4th prince, but all he saw was the 4th prince's straight back and his tightly clenched fists in his sleeves. The bailiffs who were about to chase them away were petrified, and the official who gave the order almost pissed himself in fright. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed in apology. Yu Pinyin indifferently waved his hand. His cold gaze softened when he saw the old ancestor's aged face. He then looked at Yu Siyu, Mama Ma, and the others to the side, before finally stopping on that delicate and beautiful face. It could be seen that she had deliberately dressed up today. Her hair was piled up like clouds and combed into an exquisite cross-shaped bun. In the middle of the cross-shaped bun was a blooming peony flower, but her face was even more eye-catching than the peony flower. At this moment, half of her body was leaning out, waving the handkerchief in her hand. The smile on her face was even more beautiful than the winter sun. Yu Pinyin frowned and waved his hand. She immediately shrank back and obediently leaned against the stone railing. As if she had nowhere to express the joy in her heart, she suddenly kissed her palm and made a pushing gesture. Yu Pinyan's eyesight was outstanding, so he took in the bright red lipstick mark on her palm. His lips suddenly felt slightly warm. It felt as if she was kissing him through the air, and at the same time, it was full of love. Yu Pinyan's tight lips finally lifted, revealing a smile that was enough to charm all the women in the world. His originally handsome face was shining brightly in the winter sun. The official watched helplessly as a peerless weapon turned into a person of flesh and blood. The pressure in his heart suddenly lessened. Just at this moment, the eunuch who delivered the decree arrived. Yu Pinyan dismounted from his horse to receive the decree, and immediately led 5,000 soldiers into the capital. The rest of the soldiers remained stationed outside the city. The matriarch came down from the city wall. Her waist was no longer sore, and her legs no longer hurt. She saw that her grandson was in good condition, and all her illnesses were gone. Yu Xiang supported her and was about to return to the family hall when they saw a row of soldiers quickly running over. The person in the lead half knelt and said, reporting to old madam, "The general ordered this lowly one to take you back to Marquis Yongle." Finished speaking, he indicated for them to enter the carriage. Wasn't the Marquis household sealed? The matriarch's eyes shone with surprise. His Majesty has already issued an imperial edict. Once the general returns to the capital, the Marquis household will be unsealed. Good, good, good. Let's go. We can finally go home. The matriarch cried tears of joy and impatiently boarded the carriage. Because Emperor Chengkong had sealed off the news, no one in the capital knew that the army was about to return to court. At this time, the third branch's family was jubilantly welcoming guests. Madame Zhuo wore a bright red brocade robe and sat in the main hall. She held Chang Yafu's hand and sized him up. "I haven't seen you for a few years. Full has really blossomed like a hibiscus flower." Chang Yafu shyly lowered his head. Yu Pinhong's wife, Lu Clan, sneered, "You call this good-looking? Are you all blind? Have you never seen Miss Family Hall? That's what you call beautiful enough to cause the downfall of a city." That day, when I met her eyes on the street, I didn't even know how to walk. Someone like Miss Chang is only a so-so. Moreover, she lost her virginity before marriage. Although Madame Lu's father was only a small village head, without his care, the Yu family's third branch, who couldn't even lift a finger, would have starved to death in Shu County. Who would have thought that once they gained power, they actually planned to marry a second wife for Yu Pinhong? They were simply fooling the Lu clan like fools. If they let Chang Yafu marry into the family, the Lu clan felt that they would be killed sooner or later. It was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. As soon as he said this, the entire hall fell silent. Only when Chang Yafu's sobs could be heard did Duke Jinggua's madam explode with anger and shout, "Where did you hear this? It's simply nonsense. Why would I need to deliberately ask around? Miss Chang has a cinnabar mole on her chest. Who in the capital doesn't know this? Back then, didn't she take the initiative to take off her clothes for a man to see? Why would she be afraid of people talking about it? Look at Miss Chang's figure, it's so romantic. Who knows how she's been nourished every day? She said she went back to her hometown. Who knows which adulterer's house she's hiding in? The Lu clan was originally a rural village woman. Even the crudest words came out of her mouth. Duke Jinggua's madam was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She sternly scolded, "You slut, you actually dare to slander my son like this. See if I don't tear your mouth apart." Chapter 133. Madame Zhuo jumped up in fright and ran to the door in a few steps. She grabbed the servant girl who was reporting and anxiously asked, "What did you say? Say it again." "The seal on Marquis Yongle has been lifted. Old madam has returned to the Fu." It was a group of soldiers who sent her back. They went up and tore off the seal. How could that be? Didn't they say that the Marquis household was going to be awarded to our master? No, the old madam is our master's mother. If she can return to the Fu, that means our master can return to the Fu. Hurry, 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 hurry and inform our master that the imperial edict has been passed down. Have him go to the Marquis household to take a look. Madame Zhuo was first shocked, then overjoyed. She ordered the servants to run in circles. Congratulations, younger sister. You've come a long way. Duchess Jinghua barely suppressed her anger and stepped forward with a smile. The members of the Lu clan didn't hide anymore. They lifted their skirts and rushed out, ready to see just how wealthy the legendary Marquis Yongle was, that her parents-in-law and husband still couldn't forget about it after so many years. They even shouted in their dreams that they wanted to inherit the title. Yu Junwei and his son were drinking with Duke Jinghua. When they received the news, they immediately went out to investigate. Sure enough, they saw that Marquis Yongle's main door was wide open. The seal on the door had already been reduced to pieces of scrap paper, blown away by the northern wind. Many servants and soldiers were moving things in and out, looking very busy. The matriarch held Yu Xiyu's hand in her left hand and Yu Xiang's hand in her right hand. She was standing in front of the door, looking up at the gilded plaque hanging in the courtyard. She said in a clear voice, "In a moment, set up a ladder and wipe the dust off the plaque." Okay. A steward immediately complied and sent someone to bring a ladder. Mother, why did you tear off the seal? Did His Majesty's imperial edict come down? Yu Junwei stepped forward to ask. That's right. The imperial edict came down long ago. The matriarch took out a roll of bright yellow brocade from her sleeve. Yu Junwei's eyes shone brightly, and his breathing was heavy. He struggled to maintain a steady voice as he asked, I can inherit the title. My position has been restored. Hong Er's scholarly rank has also been restored. You're dreaming. Yan Er is still alive, what title did you inherit? The old lady laughed mockingly. Without waiting for Yu Junwei to speak, Yu Miaoqi, who had come with the Lin clan to watch the show, hurriedly asked, What do you mean? Yu Xiyu sneered, Are you deaf? My big brother is not dead, how can the position of Marquis Yongle be given to others? Not only did he not die, but he also flattened the Western imperial court and made a great contribution. The more Yu Miaoqi thought about it, the heavier the fear and despair in her heart. It was so heavy that she wanted to scream on the spot. She bit the tip of her tongue and ordered herself to remain calm. She told herself that her benefactor was still here. He was so wise and skilled in strategizing. He would definitely have a way to turn the situation around. She suddenly remembered the scene of her wearing the phoenix robe. Only then did her panicked heart slowly calm down. When Yu Pinyin led the army through the streets, many of the Yu family's clansmen saw him. In the past, the clansmen had been bribed by the third branch to help the third branch fight for the title and wantonly bully the orphans and widows. After Yu Pinyin gained power, he took revenge on them one by one. The remaining clansmen didn't receive any help from him. As a result, the clansmen were quite critical of him. If it weren't for his monstrous power, he would have been expelled from the clan long ago. Previously, when Yu Pinyin was in trouble and the third branch had a chance to rise, the clansmen rushed to spread the news. They were greatly relieved and helped the third branch establish relations. They only hoped that after the third branch had a meteoric rise, they would also be able to get a share of the profits. Now that they saw that not only did Yu Pinyin not die, he even led 1,000,000 soldiers to victory and returned to the court. The shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. In order to appease Yu Pinyin, they had to do something quickly. The clansmen all thought to themselves. Because of this, when the matriarch sent someone to invite them, the clan elders immediately rushed to the ancestral hall. Yan has always been loyal and devoted to the emperor. How could he collude with the enemy to usurp the throne? Now that he has destroyed the western continent and pacified the chaos in Xinjiang, his contributions have been seen by the emperor. As early as 10 days ago, he had already issued an imperial edict to return Marquis Yongle to Yandere. Clan elders, please take a look. The matriarch spread out the bright yellow brocade on the table. The clan elders hurriedly knelt down and said, "Long live the emperor." Although I don't have any concrete evidence, I know very well who put the secret letter in Yandere's study. The matriarch coldly glanced at Yu Miaoqi and continued, "The Marquis family is in dire straits. As a family, we should help each other and support each other. However, the family is unfortunate. There are two traitors who are worse than beasts. They actually helped an outsider to slander and frame Yandere. At that time, the news of Yandere's defeat and death had already spread. It is said that the dead should be respected. One of them is Yandere's younger sister, and the other is Yandere's biological mother. However, for the sake of glory, splendor and wealth, they intended to step on Yandere's bones to ascend. Didn't he see the dragon scale guard at the front of the hall nod slightly at Yu Pinyin? It was obvious that they already knew each other. The emperor's trust in Yu Pinyin far exceeded his own, and even the fourth prince's imagination. Ao Ping tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, and a determined expression appeared on his face. However, he saw the fourth prince turn to look at him and shake his head without a trace. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in resisting. The front and back of the palace hall had probably been ambushed by countless experts of the dark sect. The ministers who had agreed to rise up with him had either really sided with him or were part of the trap set by his imperial father and the crown prince. The answer was obvious. You think you're a hero, but in the eyes of others, you're just a clown. The saddest thing in the world is this. The fourth prince suddenly felt very tired. He lowered his head and silently waited for his fate. Like him, the fifth prince and the sixth prince also accepted their fate. However, when the dragon scale guard swarmed up and took the fourth prince away without touching them, the shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. The officials who had been won over by them were also dumbfounded and momentarily stunned on the spot. The one who had truly crossed the line was the fourth prince. Although the actions of the two princes and their henchmen were punishable, if they were killed one by one, it would shake the throne of the country. It was better to spare their lives. On the contrary, it would serve as a deterrent to the officials, purge the court, and stabilize the people's hearts. From then on, for the next few decades, it was likely that no one would dare to do anything else. Emperor Qing Kong did not explain all of this. He only waved his hand and had the fourth prince and his henchmen taken away. When he spoke again, he was extremely tired. "I'm tired and need to rest. From today onwards, the crown prince will temporarily be in charge of the country. No matter whether it's a big or small matter, you can report it to the crown prince without asking for my permission. Court is dismissed. Beloved Minister Yu, please stay." The officials who were lucky enough to escape hurriedly knelt and saluted, saying, "Long live the crown prince." In Yangxin Palace Hall, Emperor Cheng Kang's desk was filled with many documents, all of which contained evidence of the fourth prince's crimes. Just the names of the people involved in the case alone was a thick stack. He was only in his early 20s this year, but as early as 14 years old, he had begun to plan for today's events. The number of people he had roped in, both openly and secretly, was innumerable. If it weren't for the fact that he had secretly observed him for several months and unearthed all of the clues he had planted, even if he was executed, it would still leave behind a huge hidden danger. This kind of protectiveness was very moving. Emperor Qing Kong laughed and waved his hand. "Help me and the crown prince clean up the imperial hall. In the future, you will be rewarded, and you will be granted a marriage. We definitely won't treat you unfairly." Yu Pinyin was overjoyed. He bid farewell to the two and left the palace to return home. The matriarch had just severed ties with the mother and daughter of the Lin clan when she saw many dragon scale guards dressed in black official robes rush into the family Yu ancestral hall. Without a word, they arrested the mother and daughter of the Lin clan and the third branch. The person in the lead glanced at the document on the table and raised his eyebrows. This official will take this document to the Ministry of Revenue for you to declare. Fortunately, you were smart enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have just arrested these few people today. After he finished speaking, he personally went to help the matriarch and restrained his hostility. Old matriarch, it's a mess here. This humble one will send you back. The matriarch looked at his black official robes and was rather confused. The embroidery on his body was indeed Yazzie, but why didn't the color match? Were these people really her grandson's subordinates? That person didn't explain. Instead, he repeatedly pleaded with her with a respectful attitude. Only then did the matriarch let down her guard and leave under the protection of a group of guards. When they were all gone, the Yu clan clansmen struggled to stand up and shout, "Oh my God, that was so close. If we were a step late, our entire clan would have been arrested and sent to the imperial prison." Old matriarch's foresight is still far and clear. All the clan elders nodded in agreement, feeling rather scared. As for those who helped the third branch to redress their grievances, they were so scared that they fell ill and couldn't recover. As soon as Yu Xiang left the ancestral hall, she was brought back to the family Shen by people sent by Shen Yuanqi. In the evening, she received the matriarch's invitation, inviting them to the prefecture Yu for a banquet. Yu Xiang took a flower petal bath and put on a charming peach blossom makeup. She wore a pink cloud butterfly dress and also applied a few drops of rose essential oil behind her ears, neck, and wrists. Her entire person was tender, delicate, and fragrant. When people saw her, they couldn't help but want to stick their eyes to her body. Shen Yuanqi was originally very fond of her, but when he thought about how his younger sister dressed up so splendidly just to meet Yu Pinyin, his mood became very sour. He restrained himself from locking the little lass at home. He pointed at the wheelchair and asked, "Why are you still in the wheelchair? Didn't you say that your legs have healed a long time ago?" "Master Ku Hui said that my bones haven't fully healed yet. It's cold in winter, so if I walk too much, it's easy to trigger arthritis. I still need to sit in the wheelchair often," Yu Xiang said, pretending to be serious. When Shen Yuanqi heard this, he felt very distressed and hurriedly ordered people to bring a thick blanket to cover her. He felt that it was inappropriate, so he put 2 hot water cups on her legs. Lulu, who was behind them, curled her lips and thought, "Miss, if you want Master Ho to openly hug you, just say so. It's not kind of you to pretend to be sick to scare the young master." When the group arrived at Marquis Yongla, they saw Yu Pinyin, who was wearing a black robe, already standing at the gate and waiting for them. When he saw the little lass sitting in the wheelchair, his cold and stiff face suddenly bloomed with a gentle smile. He bypassed Shen Yuanqi, who was cupping his hands in greeting, and directly took the little lass into his arms. He even held her buttocks and weighed them. He said discontentedly, "You've lost weight. Did you not eat properly? I missed you so much that I didn't have the appetite to eat or drink. Naturally, I lost weight." Yu Xiang leaned over and whispered in his ear, making him laugh loudly. Shen Yuanqi gnashed his teeth as he watched from the side. However, because Yu Pinyin had just returned home safely, he didn't want to embarrass him. He could only fake a smile and say, "Official Yu, you're not inviting us in." Only by falling into the path of the beast for all of your lives would you be able to make up for it. "You Miaoqi, don't talk to me about blood-related kinship. The one who first abandoned blood-related kinship was you, not me. Today's karma is all the karma you sowed back then. Just bear with it. After he finished speaking, he strode towards the prison where the male prisoners were locked up, leaving behind Yu Miaoqi who was wailing in despair. Hearing Yu Pinyan's words, the female prisoners all distanced themselves from her. They had never seen such a heartless and unscrupulous person in their lives. Yu Pinyan stopped in front of the prison and asked in a low voice, "Who is Sun Mingjie?" The prisoners all hid in the innermost corner. When they saw his thumb constantly moving the scabbard, causing the blade to emit an ear-piercing buzzing sound, they looked at each other. Finally, they found Sun Mingjie and pushed him out. Yu Pinyan had a smile on his face, but his tone was extremely cold. "I heard that you wanted to take Xiang'er as your concubine. You even said that if Xiang'er fell into your hands, you would make her beg for death." "You, Commander Yu, I was wrong, please spare me. I was stupid, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Sun Mingjie knelt on the ground and kowtowed desperately. His father rushed over to protect him, while his mother wailed miserably in the opposite prison. "After you're done, come over and eat something," Tao Hong called out. Yu Xiang only wore a bright red dudu with mandarin ducks playing in water on her upper body and a pair of bloomers of the same color on her lower body. Because the fabric was too thin, it didn't cover what should be covered. Instead, it had a kind of hazy beauty that attracted people to explore. Her figure was originally graceful, and her skin was as smooth and white as milk. When she was lying on her side on the bed, the strong contrast between the snow-white and bright red was simply breathtaking. Tao Hong and Lu Lu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and their cheeks suddenly burned red. "What do you want to eat?" "I just ate a few dumplings and it's enough. If I eat more, my stomach will bulge out. It won't look good." Yu Xiang waved her hand and gathered the scattered longans, red dates, peanuts, and other things on the bed into a pile. She smiled and said, "I'll peel a few peanuts and eat them. The peanuts don't take up much space. Then you should at least put on your undergarments so that you won't catch a cold." Lu Lu picked up the bright red undergarments that his master had carelessly thrown on the ground. "I'm not wearing them. It's already the end of July. Don't you think it's hot? Do I look good like this? Do I look beautiful? Do you want to pounce on me when you see me?" she asked as she lifted the hem of her dudu, revealing half of her plump, white, and smooth bosom. Tao Hong and Lu Lu's eyes widened. They hurriedly covered their slightly itchy noses and turned their backs. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled, "Done. I'm very satisfied with your answers. This is the effect I wanted. Quickly come over and eat some peanuts. If your son-in-law still hasn't returned in an hour, help me go to the front door and urge him." What kind of bride urges the groom to return to the room? "Miss, you don't know shame." Lu really wanted to kneel down in front of his master. "On the wedding night, we should do some shameful things." "Why would I know shame?" Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Tao Hong and Lu Lu were speechless. When Yu Pinyan returned to his room, he saw his little bride sitting cross-legged on the bed. There were many longans, peanuts, and red dates piled up at her feet. There were all kinds of fruit shells scattered on the floor. It was obvious that she hadn't been idle at all. It had only been a quarter of an hour, but her husband had already returned. Yu Xiang was shocked. She hurriedly swept the things at her feet under the bed and leaned against the pillow. She supported her chin with one hand and waved the other, assuming a seductive pose. She said in a coquettish voice, "You're back. Quickly come over." If it weren't for the scene of her catching peanuts with her mouth like a hooligan, Yu Pinyan would have definitely been attracted by his little wife's seductive appearance. Chapter 137. Yu Pinyin opened his eyes, then reflexively hugged the warm body in his arms even tighter. His large hands moved up and down, while he breathed heavily. "Stop messing around, it's time to go to court," Yu Xiang flipped over and muttered vaguely. "It's my day off today," Yu Pinyin chuckled, then walked in with his back to her. Tao Hong and Lu Lu, who were about to enter the room to help their master wash up, couldn't help but blush when they heard the passionate moans. The two of them messed around until the sun was high up in the sky before they got up to greet the old lady. "Come over and eat breakfast, I waited for you guys the entire morning," the old lady scolded them, but had a doting smile on her face. The two of them excused themselves, then after they sat down, Yu Xiang picked up a crystal shrimp dumpling, then immediately spat it out after taking a bite, then muttered, "What a strong fishy smell, the chef must have forgotten to get rid of the fishy smell today. I'm eating the same as usual. I'm getting old, and my tongue is getting blunt." The old lady took a bite and sighed helplessly. "Don't eat it if it's fishy. Eat it." Yu Pinyin scooped a bowl of fish porridge for his wife, then used his finger to wipe off the sauce on the corner of her mouth, then put it into his mouth to suck. "This is fishy too." Yu Xiang only sniffed it slightly, then turned her head away in disdain. "What's wrong with the cook, are you sick? Today's cooking isn't as good as before." Yu Pinyin drank a mouthful, then gave up when he truly couldn't taste the fishy smell, then told Tao Hong to go to the kitchen and get a bowl of noodles. Since Yu Xiang loved to eat coriander, Tao Hong spread a thick layer of coriander on the chicken noodles. The creamy white chicken soup that gave off a rich fragrance seemed even more delicious with the green coriander as a contrast. Yu Xiang sniffed it, then was satisfied. She picked up her chopsticks and mixed it well, then put it into her mouth, then immediately spat it out. "Where did you buy this coriander? Why does it taste wrong? It's so smelly. How can that be? Isn't it just the taste of coriander?" The old lady took a piece of coriander from her bowl and chewed it, looking very puzzled. Yu Pinyin didn't even try it. Instead, she waved her hand and asked the kitchen staff to change the dishes again. They changed 4 or 5 of Yu Xiang's favorite dishes in a row, but she rejected them all for one reason or another. Yu Pinyin didn't dare to delay any longer. He immediately took out his invitation and asked the servants to call for the imperial physician. "Your wife is pregnant. She has been pregnant for more than 2 months. The fetus is very stable. Please rest assured, Duke." The imperial physician stood up and congratulated him. Everyone in the room was stunned, including Yu Xiang, the mother of the child. "I'm pregnant. But last month, I had a menorrhagia." Yu Xiang stupidly touched her stomach. When Yu Pinyin heard this, he immediately suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and ordered, "Imperial physician, carefully check my wife's pulse again. Don't worry, High Duke, your wife's health is fine. Some people do have their periods in the first 2 months of pregnancy. Although it's different from normal people, it doesn't affect the body. This humble one will prescribe some medicine for your wife. She'll be fine after taking it for 2 or 3 days. Open, open, open. Quickly open it." The old lady finally regained her senses. After urging the imperial physician, she put her hands together and prayed to the gods. Her grandson and granddaughter-in-law had been married for 2 years, but there was still no good news. She was really anxious. The imperial physician hurriedly went to the next room to prescribe medicine. After Yu Xiang finished touching her stomach, she suddenly jumped up and hung on to her husband. She carefully pecked his forehead, cheeks, and the tip of his nose. Only when his face was covered in saliva did she shout happily, "I'm pregnant, I'm having a baby. I'm going to be a mother. That's right, I'm going to be a father too." Yu Pinyin hurriedly held her butt and kissed her back. The couple was immersed in endless joy. The old lady smiled and shook her head. She led the servants out. When they reached the door, she worriedly said, "Quickly put Xiang down after you've hugged her enough. Don't let her fall. The withered family had always been a sore point for the old lady. Ever since Master Ho and her son passed away one after another, the Lin clan Yumiauchi were exiled to Shoa City, and Yusiyu was married off. There were only 3 masters left in the huge Duke of Yu's household. On normal days, there were groups of servants coming and going, so it wasn't obvious. On the eve of New Year's Eve, the 3 of them sat around a huge round table to eat a reunion dinner. That scene was truly lonely. In the past 2 years, the old lady didn't forget to add incense oil to the child-giving guanyin every month. The paintings in her granddaughter-in-law's room were all replaced with paintings of hundreds of children and thousands of grandchildren. She had been looking forward to the stars and the moon, and finally, her little great-great-great-grandson had arrived. When she heard that Yusiyu's eldest brother-in-law was celebrating his 30th birthday, she originally didn't want to pay attention to it. But now, she happily took her granddaughter-in-law out. When you go, tell Siyu to share some of your good fortune. She's already been married for 2 years, but there's still no news. Sitting in the swaying carriage, the old lady's joy diminished slightly. Didn't the doctor say that there's no problem with her and son-in-law's health? Perhaps it's fate that hasn't arrived yet. When fate arrives, it'll naturally come. Look, isn't that the case for me? Yu Xiang happily rubbed her belly. You're right. In the past 2 years, with his younger brother's help, they slowly improved and became a 5th-rank Honglu Temple Shaoqing. In order to expand his network and let the higher-ups realize how strong his backing was, Xiao Xianhui repeatedly begged his younger brother to invite Duke Yu. In the end, this matter fell on Yusiyu's head. Yusiyu understood her brother's habit of not liking social gatherings. She only sent someone to inform the matriarch and didn't force it. Therefore, when she bumped into her brother dismounting at the door, her eyes widened in surprise. Big brother, why are you here? To accompany Xiang'er to relax. Yu Pinyin said as he carefully carried his wife down from the carriage. The matriarch stood on the shaft of the carriage and bent over to support her granddaughter-in-law. She repeatedly warned her grandson to be careful and not to bump into anything. These 2 pampered Yusiyu to the point that it angered both the gods and men. Although today was a little exaggerated, Yusiyu didn't think much of it and went forward to help her sister-in-law. Why did you bring them along? Seeing the pink-clothed beautiful woman and white-clothed youth standing behind Yusiyu, Yusiyu's brows furrowed tightly, causing the beautiful woman to lower her head and cover her face to make a panicked and helpless expression. The youth glared back at her, not to be outdone. Yusiyu curled her lips and pointed at her husband who was chatting with her brother. She said in a low voice, he told me to bring them to see the world. He said something about how they are the sons of a benefactor, so it's not good to mistreat them. In the first year, Yusiyu had lived very comfortably, thinking that she had married a good man who valued friendship and righteousness. Who knew that it wasn't a good thing for a good man to value friendship and righteousness too much? No matter how deeply his greedy and ungrateful eldest brother-in-law had hurt him, he didn't learn from his mistakes. The next time he needed help, he would still willingly help. If the 2 of them hadn't separated from the family and their parents-in-law had both passed away, who knew how much of a burden he would have had. Last year, he had been sent by the emperor to suppress bandits in the Shi Mountains. When he came back, he actually brought back a young and beautiful woman and a young youth, saying that they were the children of his deputy general, Li Fenghua. Li Fenghua had died in order to save him, and before his death, he had entrusted his children to him. Yusiyu originally planned to prepare a dowry for the woman to marry off, and then find a good marriage for the youth. Who knew that the other party would be so careless? The woman actually took advantage of her husband's drunken state to have intimate contact with him. When the youth saw that they had succeeded, he went to lure Yusiyu over. Yusiyu rushed over and caught them in the act. Her thick eyelashes were covered with tears and looked very lovable. The opera troupe was changing the stage, so the sound of gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Thus, her movements were particularly noticeable. Madame Wu was stunned, then exclaimed with joy, "Sister-in-law, don't tell me you're pregnant. I'll send someone to find a doctor for you." As soon as she finished speaking, Yu suddenly turned her head to look at Madame Li with a cold and stern gaze. Yu Xiang leisurely smiled and said, "Whether she's pregnant or not, Siyu will check when we get back. Today is a joyous occasion, yet you're openly inviting a doctor into the house. You're really not particular. Moreover, she's just a concubine, how can she be worthy of being called sister-in-law? Furen is willing to be cheap, so don't implicate our Siyu." As soon as she finished speaking, she gently patted Yusiyu's tightly clenched fist. Yusiyu quickly calmed down and didn't say anything. She only glanced at Madame Wu with a smile that wasn't a smile. Because the male and female guests were only separated by a few screens, everything that was said on the other side could be easily heard, not to mention when the gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Xiao Xianhui and Xiao Xuanze awkwardly nodded and apologized to the expressionless Yu Pinyin. Madame Li's younger brother was quite arrogant, so he couldn't help but show some resentment. Yu Pinyin picked up his wine glass and poured himself a drink. From time to time, he would send someone over to remind his wife not to be picky with her food and drink. Xiao Xuanze was originally his former subordinate, but because of the concubine incident a year ago, their relationship was no longer the same as before. At this moment, they sat opposite each other in silence. When others saw the stagnant atmosphere at the main table, they all shook their heads and secretly lamented that the Xiao brothers didn't know how to conduct themselves. One was too indecisive, while the other was too greedy. Sooner or later, they would gradually drift away from family Yu. While they were thinking, a brightly colored female lead came out from the stage. She held a golden goblet in her hand and began to sing the song, "Drunken Imperial Concubine." She walked to the side of the stage with graceful and swaying steps. Her bewitching and misty eyes were fixed on the handsome young man at the main table. With such an obvious action, not to mention the jealous Yu Xiang, even the bystanders noticed the clues. The old madam hurriedly pressed her granddaughter-in-law's shoulder and whispered, "Calm down, don't throw a tantrum. You're pregnant right now." Yu Xiang touched the baby in her belly and had no choice but to restrain herself. Yu Siyu also forgot to bicker with Madame Li and sent someone to inquire about the female lead's background. Madame Wu smiled as she picked up her teacup and took a sip. She said, "There's no need to inquire." Only now did she understand that Yu Siyu was not only her sister-in-law, but also the pillar of the Xiao family. As the saying goes, everyone kicks a man who is down. If she left, the Xiao family would face the danger of collapse at any moment. Madame Li was secretly happy, but her face showed some grievance. She lowered her head and wiped her tears. Madame Wu didn't care whether the occasion was right or not. She slammed the table and scolded, "What are you crying for? It's all your brother's fault. Brother-in-law, hurry up and go to the Duke's mansion to apologize." Xiao Xuanze recovered from his daze and hurriedly chased after them. Xiao Xianhui sent the guests away awkwardly. When he turned back to look at the Li siblings, his eyes were filled with gloomy killing intent. Young Master Li was just acting on a whim. Now that he came to his senses, he knew that he had caused a great disaster. He immediately trembled in fear. In order to appease Duke Yu, there were two paths in front of the Xiao family: 1. Simply divorce Yu Siyu; 2. Get rid of him and his sister. Young Master Li's intestines turned green with regret when he provoked a fatal disaster with just one sentence. After Yu Siyu returned home, she settled down for a few days. She felt that it would be impossible for her to find a perfect husband like her brother in this lifetime. However, she was a proud person. In addition, she had been influenced by Yu Xiang for a long time. She would rather let go than go back and compromise. Without Madame Li, there would be Madame Zhao, Madame Qian, and Madame's son in the future. She would waste her life fighting with other women. How boring and ridiculous it would be. She didn't let Xiao Xuanze deal with the Li siblings. Instead, she signed the divorce papers. After Xiao Xuanze returned home, he fell seriously ill. After recovering from his illness, he found that he had been demoted. He was transferred to the most remote and desolate northern tribes and could never return to the capital in this lifetime. He took the Li siblings with him. On the way, Madame Li couldn't bear the labor and miscarried. Young Master Li knew that the northern tribes was a barren land. Not to mention his future, he might even die of exhaustion. He took advantage of the night to escape. In the end, Yu Xiu remarried and became the second wife. Coincidentally, the other party was the small steward that Yu Xiang had taken a fancy to when she first proposed marriage. There was a rule in the family, no concubine before 40 and without a son. Because he had offended his superiors, he was sent here at the last minute to replenish his supplies. He had only heard of the prefecture Yu case, but he didn't know the inside story. The guard laughed sarcastically. In order to help Prince Li fight for the throne, she put fabricated evidence in Duke Yu's study to frame Duke Yu and the Crown Prince for rebellion. When Duke Yu fell into the Wu River, his life and death were unknown. She colluded with her mother and third uncle to frame Duke Yu. Basin after basin of dirty water was poured non-stop. Not to mention the siblings, I'm afraid that even the enemy who killed their father was nothing more than this. If Duke Yu hadn't luckily survived and defeated the Western continent, I don't know to what extent the family Yu's branch would have been destroyed by her. Old Madame Yu said that as long as the person is alive, she doesn't care about anything else. If you want to do it, do it. Just don't go too far. My mother, there is actually such a sinister woman in the world. It can be said that the saying, the mouth of a green bamboo snake and the sting of a wasp's tail are both not poisonous, but the most poisonous is a woman's heart. The jailer was speechless. He looked at Yu Miaoqi with an even fiercer gaze. He pinched her neck and pushed her behind a tree. Then, there was the sound of tearing clothes and a woman's miserable howl. The Lin clan wanted to go over, but they were stopped by the guard. He warned, he has been holding back for 2 months. Now he is a hungry wolf. After eating that, he will eat you to fill his stomach. Think carefully before you go over. The Lin clan suddenly froze. They knelt for a moment, then slowly retreated into the crowd. They buried their faces in the bundle and sobbed. Because he had been holding back for so long, the first time was quickly over. The jailer rested for a moment and then continued. Yu Miaoqi was tossed and turned for almost an hour. When she came out, she pulled up her pants and whistled. Her whole body was relaxed. Yu Miaoqi, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. Her clothes had long been torn to pieces, and there were still traces of tears on her face. When she walked towards Mrs. Lin, her legs were slightly trembling, and she could barely stand. She avoided the sympathetic, numb or gloating gazes of the female prisoners. She took out a robe and wrapped it around herself. She silently cried. She never would have thought that her pure body would be taken by such a lowly person. It wasn't until the other party had pierced through her body and continued to hurl insults at her that she truly realized that she was no longer the legitimate daughter of a rich and powerful family. Instead, she was a prisoner, a refugee, an existence even worse than a slave. Before she even reached Shuo City, she had already fallen into a situation worse than death. How was she going to live the rest of her days?